She was in the records room when he arrived, which was not where he had expected to find her. He had expected, though expected was perhaps too precise a word for what had been, in truth, an assumption so comfortable it had never been examined, to find the house in the state he had left it, which was managed, which was adequate, which was the particular condition of a house that functions without anyone having recently asked it to do anything more than that. He had not expected to find the records room occupied, not because the records room was a private space, but because in 4 years of marriage, the records room had never been occupied by anyone other than the land steward on quarterly account days, and today was not a quarterly account day. She was at the long table with 3 ledgers open and a 4th at her elbow, making notations in the careful hand he had seen, but rarely, on the rare occasions they had exchanged correspondence, her coat still on, because the records room in November was cold in the particular way of rooms that no one has thought to heat, because no one expected to be in them. She looked up when he came to the door. She did not startle. She said his Grace had returned sooner than she had anticipated, he said. The London matter had resolved more quickly than expected. She said she was glad. She returned to the ledger. He'd stood in the doorway of his own records room and looked at his wife making notations in his quarterly accounts and understood, with the slow and faintly disorienting quality of a man encountering evidence of something he had not known was happening, that the accounts were already done, not begun. Done. He said that Aldous had not mentioned the accounts were under review. She said she had asked Aldous to hold them until she had completed her own analysis, and that she had intended to give him a summary when he returned, but had not anticipated returning quite so soon. She said she could give him the summary now, or he was welcome to wait until she had finished the annotation. He said he would wait. He came into the records room and sat in the chair against the wall that no one had ever sat in, because no one had ever needed to wait in the records room before, and she returned to her notations, and he sat in the cold room and watched his wife work through his accounts with the focused, unhurried attention of someone who has been doing this for long enough to have developed a method, and he understood, with a quality of understanding that arrived before the words, for it did, that this was not the first time she had done this. This is the story of a title given without warmth, and the woman who built it into something anyway, and of the man who came home to find that what he had given her, cold, skeletal, unremarkable, had been made, in his absence and without his instruction, into something that deserved the name he had attached to it. It is a story about what a woman does when the thing she has been given is insufficient, and no one is coming to make it sufficient, and she has simply decided to make it herself. Subscribe to this channel now and turn on the bell, because this story is not going where you expect it to go, and the moment that changes everything is not a confrontation or a declaration, but something considerably quieter and more permanent. Stay from the beginning. She had understood the nature of what she was being given before the ink was dry on the settlement. Her family's solicitor had explained the terms with the careful neutrality of a man who had learned not to editorialize about the arrangements he was engaged to formalize, and she had listened with the careful attention of a woman who understood that the terms being described were the actual terms and not a preliminary position to be negotiated into something warmer. The Duke of Ashfurley was a man of 52 considerable assets, a name of centuries, and almost no interest in the practical management of any of it. He employed a land steward, a house steward, a secretary, and a housekeeper, and he moved between his London residence and his 3 estates with the seasonal regularity of a man who has organized his life so efficiently that he rarely needs to think about it. He required a duchess primarily in the social sense, which was to say primarily in the sense that a duchess was expected at certain occasions, and that the absence of one had begun to generate the kind of remark that a man of his standing preferred not to generate. He was not seeking a companion. He was not seeking a confidant or a partner, in any sense that the word partnership implies reciprocity. He was seeking someone to fill a position that had been vacant long enough to become conspicuous, and she was, by every available measure, suited to filling it. She understood this. She had understood it before she agreed to it, and she had agreed to it not from desperation or from the absence of alternatives, but from the particular clear-eyed pragmatism of a woman who has assessed her situation accurately and determined that this arrangement, with all of its limitations clearly visible, offered her more than the alternatives on the table. The alternatives had not been abundant, the alternatives had not been nothing, but they had not been this, which was a title, an estate, a position of genuine authority over a household and a staff and a set of relationships, with tenants and neighbours that could, if properly attended to, amount to something. She had looked at the arrangement, and she had seen not what it was but what it could be made into, and she had signed the papers with the steady hands of someone who has made a decision and intends to execute it. She arrived at Ashverley House in late October, when the grounds were past their best, but still carrying the amber of a season that had been good, and she had assessed it with the same clear attention she had brought to the settlement papers. The house was large. The staff was competent and slightly underemployed, in the way of staffs whose employer is rarely in residence, and who have accordingly developed the particular efficiency of people who are very good at maintaining things and have never been asked to do anything more than maintain them. The accounts were current, which meant they were being kept, and she spent her first week reviewing them to understand what current meant in this particular household, and what she found was that current meant recorded rather than interrogated, which was a meaningfully different thing, and which told her something important about the estate's management. The tenants were her second week. She went with Aldous, the land steward, a man of considerable knowledge and evident frustration, who received her request to accompany him with the controlled surprise of someone who has been managing alone for long enough to have stopped expecting company. She had brought the account book. She had also brought the observations she had already made from the accounts, which were specific, and which were the observations of someone who had been reading ledgers seriously, not reviewing them for form, and Aldous had taken one look at the specificity and revised his assessment of her within the first property they visited. She asked the right questions. She listened to the answers in the way that meant she was going to use them. She made notes that were organized rather than decorative, and she had, by the end of the second property, entered into the kind of working relationship with Aldous that he had apparently not had with anyone above him in the estate's hierarchy for some years, which was the relationship of two people who both understand what they are looking at and both intend to do something useful with the understanding. He was professionally careful for another week before he stopped being careful and started being honest, at which point the information available to her increased considerably, and the picture of what the estate actually was and what it could be made into became considerably clearer. She had come to the Ashverley title without warmth. She had come to it with clarity, and clarity, she had always understood, was the more durable thing. The house first, because the house was the visible part, the thing that disclosed to every person who entered it what kind of establishment this was and what kind of attention it received. She did not renovate, she did not impose a new order or redecorate in the senses that made a place unrecognizable to itself. She attended, which was a different thing, and the attending produced, over the course of the first winter, a house that looked less like a place that was being maintained and more like a place that was being lived in, and the distinction visible primarily in the quality of small things. The light in the east corridor, the arrangement of the morning room, the way the entrance hall received a visitor, was the distinction between a house that runs and a house that breathes. The staff noticed before anyone else. They noticed in the way that staff notice things, which is to say immediately and without comment, processing the change as a new condition of employment that required adjustment and then adjusting. The housekeeper, Mrs. Patten, a woman of 20 years in the position who had developed an entire professional philosophy around the management of an establishment whose mistress was principally absent, had taken 3 weeks to adjust her philosophy to the new reality, and then had adjusted it completely with the efficiency of someone who recognizes quality when she encounters it, and does not require it to justify itself. What she said to Aldous in the third month was not elaborate. She said that the house had not been this way before. Aldous said he knew. She said it was better. He said he knew that too. Neither of them said it to the Duke. The Duke was not there to say it to. He arrived twice in the first year, each time briefly, each time for reasons that had to do with estate business rather than residence, and each time he moved through the house with the comfortable efficiency of a man in a place he considers managed and does not require to be anything more than that. He ate the meals that were prepared and reviewed the documents that required his attention and slept in the rooms that were kept for him and departed without apparent awareness that the house he was moving through was not the house he had left, that something had happened to it in his absence that had not happened to it in the years before his absence. He was, she noted without dwelling on it, an expert in the assumption of continuity. She had not built what she had built for him. This was the thing she needed to be honest with herself about. In the way she was honest with herself, about everything that was worth being honest, about which was everything. She had built it because the estate existed and required building, because the tenants were people whose lives were meaningfully affected by the quality of its management, because the house was a place she lived, and she intended to live in a place that was worth living in, and because she was a woman of considerable capability who had been given an enormous amount of material to work with and had no intention of wasting it. She had not built it expecting recognition. Recognition from a man who was present to witness the building was not a currency she had organized her ambitions around, and she was too practical to begin organizing them that way now. What she had organized her ambitions around was the work itself, which was sufficient justification, and the results, which were becoming with each season more legible in the estate's accounts, and the tenants' reports, and the quality of the house, and the morale of the staff, and the small, accumulating evidence of a place that was being properly and seriously attended to. The title, which had been given without warmth, had been built into something that warranted it. That was the whole of her intention, and it had been met. Subscribe to this channel now, so you are here for the part where he comes home and finds it, because the finding is not what he expected, and the story of the finding is the part that this has all been building toward. Turn on the bell. This is only the halfway point. He came home for the third time in November of the second year, which was the visit that coincided with the records room and the ledgers and the moment in the doorway. He had intended, as on his previous visits, to review the quarterly accounts with Aldous and attend to the business that required his physical presence, and to return to London within the week. He had not intended to spend the first morning of his visit sitting in a cold chair, watching his wife annotate his accounts, and he had not intended to remain in the room for the full hour it took her to finish, and he had not intended to ask, when she set down her pen, whether she was prepared to give him the summary now. She was. The summary was not brief. It was not brief because she did not summarize briefly things that were not brief, and the estate's accounts for the past 4 quarters were not brief. They were detailed and specific, and they disclosed, in the particular language of ledgers, reviewed by someone who understands both what they record and what they fail to record, a picture of an estate that had undergone a measurable improvement in the past 18 months. She went through it methodically. He listened with the attention of a man who is accustomed to receiving account summaries from his steward, and who is finding this one different in quality from those he has received before, not in the figures themselves, which Aldous had kept accurately, but in the understanding of what the figures meant and what they implied about what remained to be done. He asked 3 questions. She answered all 3 with the directness of someone who has been thinking about these questions longer than he has been thinking about asking them. When she finished, he said, with the careful neutrality of a man choosing precision over any other register, that the analysis was thorough. She said she had had time to be thorough. He said Aldous had not mentioned the accounts were under review before the quarterly meeting. She said she had asked him not to. He said why. She paused for the precise length of time it takes a person to decide how honest to be, and she said she had wanted to complete the work before presenting it, and that she had understood from the beginning that work presented incomplete was understood differently than work presented complete, and that she had preferred to present it complete. He received this. He did not immediately respond to it, which she noted, because it was the response of a man who has heard something accurate and is taking it seriously rather than deflecting it. He said he would like to review the full annotation when she had finished it. She said she would have it complete by Thursday. He said thank you. It was, she reflected afterward, in the east sitting room, with tea she had poured for herself, because no one had brought it yet. First time he had thanked her for anything specifically, rather than the general and ambient. Thank you that a man offers a household that manages itself without requiring his attention. She did not make too much of it. She had been a precise woman before this marriage, and intended to remain one, and precision required her to note that one thank you did not constitute a change in the architecture of the arrangement. She noted it and returned to her reading. He went to the tenants with Aldous the following day. She knew this because she had asked Aldous, when she met him in the steward's office that morning, to take the Duke to the East Quarter first, because the East Quarter was where the improvements of the past 2 years were most visible, and because she wanted the Duke to see what visible meant in this context before he saw the ledger's version of it. Aldous had looked at her for a moment, with the expression he used when he was processing a request that revealed something about its source that he had not previously known, and then he had said he would take the Duke east. They were gone all morning. She spent it in the library, which was the room she had made most thoroughly hers in the 2 years of this arrangement, not by filling it with her things, but by using it in the particular way of someone for whom books are a serious and daily matter rather than a furnishing choice. The library had been well supplied when she arrived, and she had added to it with the precision of someone who knows what they are, adding and why, and the result was a room that worked as a library rather than a room that looked like one. He came to the library that evening. She was there, as she was most evenings, and he came to the door and knocked, which was what he had been doing since the records room, which was also new. She said, "Come in." He sat in the chair by the fire, not the chair she read in, but the one across from it, and he looked at the shelves for a moment before he said anything. He said Aldous had shown him the East Quarter. She said she thought it would be useful for him to see it before the accounts. He said it was. He was quiet for a moment in the way of a man who is organizing something that does not easily organize itself. He said the Partridge holding had a new tenant. She said it did. He said the holding had been vacant for 3 years before that. She said it had been vacant because the farmhouse required repairs that had not been made, and that once the repairs were made, finding a tenant had not been difficult. He said the repairs had come from the estate accounts. She said they had, and that the returns on the tenancy would recoup the cost within 4 years, and then exceed it, and that the figures were in the analysis she would have ready by Thursday. He said he would read them. He was quiet again. She returned her attention to her book, not because she was finished with the conversation, but because she had learned that silence, in this man's presence, did not require filling, and that filling it prematurely produced less information than allowing it to develop. He said, finally, with the specific effort of a man forming words around something he has not previously put into words, that the estate was in meaningfully better condition than when he had left it 2 years prior. She said that had been her intention. He said he had not known it was her intention. She looked at him over the edge of her book. She said that when one arrived as mistress of an estate, the improvement of the estate was generally among one's intentions, and that she had not thought it required stating. He said perhaps it should have been stated. She said perhaps he should have asked. This landed without drama as she had offered it, as a simple and accurate observation about a simple and accurate fact, which was that in 2 years of marriage he had not once asked her what she was doing or intended to do with the considerable amount of time and capability she was bringing to bear on his estate, and that the not asking had not prevented the doing, but had produced a situation in which the doing remained entirely invisible to the person who owned what had been done. He received it. He sat with it in the particular silence of a man who is not going to deflect, because he understands that deflection would be inaccurate. He said he had not asked. She said no. He said he understood there was a failure. She said it was the kind of failure that tends to go unnoticed until there is a great deal to notice at once, and that she understood how it happened. She said this without softening it, which was not the same as saying it without generosity. He looked at her with the expression of a man who has been given more credit than he has earned, and who understands that this is a form of respect rather than absolution, and that the respect requires something of him in return. He said he would like to ask now if she was willing to answer. She set down her book. She said that she was willing. He asked what she had been doing for 2 years. She told him. Not briefly. She told him about the accounts, and the East Quarter, and the Partridge Holding, and the repairs, and the tenancy, and about the house, and what she had attended to and why, and about Mrs. Patton and Aldous, and the quality of the staff once they had been given clear direction, and about the library, and the East sitting room, and the way she had found the house, and the way she had left it each morning for 2 years, and he listened through all of it, with a quality of attention she had not previously received from him in any conversation of any length, which was simply the quality of being fully heard. When she finished, the fire had burned lower, and the room was darker, and outside the library window the November grounds were bare. He said it was a great deal of work. She said it was. He said he had not understood the scope of it. She said she knew. He said he was not certain, sitting in that room at that hour, that he had a right to ask what he was about to ask. She said that depended on what it was. He said he was going to be in London considerably less next year, that the business that had occupied him there was reaching a resolution, and that his presence in London would be required less frequently, and that he was. He said it with the particular care of a man choosing words for something that has not previously been spoken, intending to spend more of his time at Ashford. She looked at him carefully. She said she was glad to hear it. She said it with the same precision with which she said everything, which meant he heard both the gladness and the assessment underneath it, which was that gladness was not the same as assumption, and that the extent of his presence would reveal itself in practice rather than in intention. He said he understood that. He said he understood it, in the specific sense that he had been a man who operated by assumption for long enough to understand what assumptions cost, and that he was aware that what he was offering was an intention rather than a record, and that the record remained to be built. She said that was honest. He said he was trying to be. She picked up her book. He did not leave immediately. He sat in the chair by the fire, and she read, and the library was quiet in the way of the library in the evenings, which was the particular quiet of a room that has been made for exactly this use by someone who understood what the use required, and he was in it, and he was present in it, and that was, she noted without drawing a conclusion she had not yet earned the evidence for, a beginning. The title had been given without warmth. She had built it into something anyway, out of the material available to her, and the capability she had brought with her, and the simple refusal to let a thing be inadequate when it was within her power to make it adequate. She had not built it expecting to be recognized for it. She had built it because it was worth building, and because she was the person available to build it, and because the building itself was its own justification, that he had come home to it, and found it, and understood, imperfectly, and, with the particular difficulty of a man learning to see something he had, trained himself not to look at, that what he had come home to was not the house he had left, but something considerably more than that. This was not the point of the building. But she was, with the careful honesty she brought to all assessments, including assessments of herself, interested in what he did next. She was watching, and in the evenings he was in the library, and she was in the library, and the fire was lit, and outside the window the east garden that she had built from managed grass waited under its November frost. For the spring she intended to be there, to see. She would be there. She intended to be there for a long time, and for the first time in 2 years of a title given without warmth, she was not the only person in this house who understood what that meant. Leave a like if this story found you where you needed it. It tells us that quiet things deserve to be heard. Subscribe to this channel and turn on the bell so the next one arrives from the very beginning, because they are always built to be experienced whole. And if you know someone who has been building something extraordinary without recognition, share this with them today. What they built is real. The spring always shows it for exactly what it is.